Wednesday, February 14th. Now, back in 1964, that winter, Walt and I, that's my dad, we were trapping muskrats just outside the edge of the village there, in a place called the Gully, just off the end of Terrace Avenue. We would go down into the gully wearing our deep waders and walk right into the water to find places to hunt down the muskrats. And we walked through a big culvert that one of the thruway ramps, New York State thruway ramps, went over top of. And when you went down into that culvert, slogging through the water and come out the other side, it was kind of like, well, for me, it was kind of like going through a time tunnel, because as we came out the other side into this area that was sort of landlocked between the thruway and Route 17 and the Ramapo River, it was sort of like we were in the 19th century doing our old-fashioned trapping. And up overhead was a thruway in the 20th century. So we had these different phases of time. Now, the gully, we followed right on out to the Ramapo River, where it outflowed. And from there, we went left up along the western shoreline of the Ramapo River, under another thruway overpass, all the way up to the 4th Street Bridge. If we had gone right, we'd be going south down along the river to a little community of houses where Ramapos lived, and that's called the Meadows. And just below that is the state line going toward Jersey, and that's where the river gets kind of marshy, and it's really good muskrat country down there. But Walt didn't want us to trap down there because he said he discovered someone else was trapping muskrats down there. Yeah. Turned out years later, I learned that was Kevin Powell. Kevin Powell down there, just beyond the Meadows, trapping the muskrat. And that was also a place down there right along the riverbank. It was back of Ford Motor Company where they burned a lot of trash. And Walt said you could always know when they were burning barrels of paint because the smoke billowed up in black, ashen materials. Sort of smelled like rubber, he said, like burning rubber. And anyway, this one time, we had our waders on, and the river was kind of shallow, and we broke through some thin ice and crossed the river and came up the eastern shoreline, and that's between the river and the Erie Railroad Yard. And Walt pointed out where there'd been a turntable in the yard at one time, years earlier, for the big steam engines. That was gone now. And I saw these metal things. They looked kind of like crescent moons, and they were like collars, big like this, like big-sized things, and they were laying down the bank from the tracks. And I asked him what it was, and he said, well, they're brake shoes. He said, you see, they had two, one on the other side of the axle, and the air brakes would cause them to come in and squeeze the axle. And I said, well, yeah, but they're metal, and the axle's metal. It squeaks an awful lot, wouldn't it squeak? Oh, well, no, they had asbestos pads baked right into the metal collar there. And so we looked around, and sure enough, we found some of these old brake shoes laying on the ground there that had traces of asbestos in it from where the pads had worn out. Walt said the brakeman changes out the brake shoes right there in the yard and throws the old ones down the bank. Yeah, so right there, in the Watershed, just downriver is where they burned lead paint and then dumped it when they were done with the burning into the river. And then upriver was where they changed out the brake shoes and dumped the old shoes with asbestos in them down the bank. And overhead, of course, was the thruway, and this is all on top of the Watershed. Yeah, well, we'll figure it all out. Do another one tomorrow. See you then.